Guys, be honest with me, does it look wonky? Because it always looks wonky to me. Like, the picture in the background looks wrong, but that could be the angle of the camera. But anyway, got this. Still doing this. How is everyone? Good? Go to the cinema this afternoon with Adam. We're gonna go see Coco. So look out for that review later on. But yeah, we're I'm still looking at this. I'm still thinking we're almost to the end of January, which means I'm almost 40, which is kind of depressing me closer and closer I get to it. Especially since I'm all home alone. So but hey, I've got plans for the weekend, so I'll be good. Doing so every day so far this week. Okay, good question. What is the best advice you ever received? And again, this is along with the spelling yesterday, because if you notice, it spells flavour the American way. So this is definitely a non-Eurocentric book. Best advice. I mean, I guess it could come from many places. Depends where you got it from. I suppose if you know, the best advice is always to try and be yourself, but then that's doesn't always work, especially when you're a bit weird and quirky. Stick up for yourself, although that's come to me contradictory, because I've had people, not people I'm necessarily friends with, but not, you know, enemies either. You know, just people I've worked with and, you know, had professional relationships. And she'd be like, tell me to stick up for myself to the people who were being a bit rude to me, and then when I stick up to myself against her, she'd be a bit, oh, you're sticking up, and it's like, well, you told me to stick up for myself. So that was a mixed bag. So long as you're not becoming a bully yourself, as long as you're not antagonising someone deliberately, you know, I'm not saying if someone shoves you, then I guess you have the right to sort of shove them back or hold them, you know, away from you. So I'm not like advocating eye for an eye, but if you are being physically threatened, then you certainly have a certain recourse to, you know, protect yourself or people around you. But at the same time, if someone calls you a name and you punch them in the nose, unless the name they've called you is seriously offensive and you've already advised them several times not to do that, and even then I wouldn't necessarily encourage the violence, but at least that way you've got a build up. But if they're just like, hey you, funny hair, bosh, then you're clearly in the wrong. So that's my advice, is don't be the nose puncher unless they... No, don't be the nose puncher. There are probably circumstances we could all think of where there would be an exception to that rule, but I don't want to encourage that. God damn it. I love that game, but it buzzes so many times. And I've turned off all the notifications! I mean, I guess be yourself probably is some of the best advice you could have. Drink water. Drink water. Good advice. Always be honest, but I kind of do that one anyway. Always am honest. Enunciate. Enunciation's always good, although I think I am aware. Okay, I'm gonna wind it back a bit. One of the advice Erin likes to give me, gave me back when I first started doing these, is to slow down a bit. Well, actually he said breathe, and I interpreted that to mean slow down, because I am aware that I tend to be a bit fast, and I think possibly in my earlier videos I was faster, so as I've sort of gotten more confident in doing these, maybe I have slowed down a bit. I don't know. But within that, yeah, an enunciation and actually saying the words and making yourself clear. I don't know if that's necessarily... I guess it could be good advice. You know, thinking things through. You know, considering your words. Himself watched one of my videos and said, oh, you shouldn't keep saying it's like crutch words, it's crutch words. Like, I'm literally doing these on the hoof. I'm I'm reading the book. I mean, you'll those of you who've watched the old one of these, I'm reading the question, and I'm doing the thing there and then. Yeah, you're gonna say and you're gonna sort of stop and think for a moment. So he's getting that from his Toastmasters, and I've looked. It's a proper thing. It's like it's international. I've looked through his books, but sometimes what a person thinks is good advice doesn't necessarily fit the situation. But doesn't necessarily mean it's bad advice. It just means that the whole picture needs to be looked at. And I think in this instance he doesn't always see the whole picture because he sees the picture he wants to see. And that's... Okay, another piece of advice is not to judge people too harshly, especially when they're trying to help you. But, again, that's situational. There are situations where you're going to know this. Don't overreact. I think that's what we've come to. Because there are going to be times when you are receiving advice from someone who is well-intentioned, but you have more information than they do. You are there, and you're like, well, no, actually, whilst I hear what you're saying, that doesn't actually... This is the actual thing, and you're not understanding it. And if they start getting arsy with you, just take a step back. So yeah, take a breath, count to 10, consider words. That's pretty solid advice, to be thoughtful, I guess. To not immediately jump up and down on the situation, to consider everything around you and what's going on. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty dang solid advice. And if you're in a new situation, like I'm not always good in group situations, crowd situations, then maybe turn your bloody game off and hope it doesn't buzz the whole board. But don't be afraid to stand quiet. I'm not saying like stand in the corner and hide from everybody, but just hover, just listen. Find out the whole conversation before you try and join in. Because sometimes you're not gonna, if you try and jump in and be, oh, well, I have a funny story, and I still do it with people I do know. It's like, well, this is funny, and it's not. People don't smile. So don't be afraid to sort of not talk and just stand there and be quiet for a minute, because if you're stood there and being quiet and polite, people are probably going to invite you in. So, oh, hey, do you have an opinion on this? Kind of a funny story regarding group conversation is when I was working at the Brewster's Fair. It was a Brewster's. They became a Brewers Fair. It's the same company, just a kind of slightly different concept. I can't remember when this conversation happened, but we were discussing, because it was like an off-menu thing, and we were discussing like, oh, how we can use this thing, or make the use of this particular food that we've got an excess of, and I'd said something to the assistant manager or something, and we were kind of having the conversation, and a couple of other people came in and said, oh, well, how about this and that, and someone actually turned around, and I then expressed another opinion on it, and one of the lads was just like, oh, who invited you into this conversation? And we all kind of looked at him and goes, he was tall. I was like, she started this conversation, it's her conversation that you're crashing into. It was like, oh. So maybe it's one of those you had to be there moments. But yeah, your input's always welcome, if it's good input. Even if it's bad input, don't be afraid to speak up, because someone could help. Hopefully if you're in a constructive environment, someone could say, not quite, but let's see if we can workshop it. Let's see if we can, maybe not workshop it, but let's see if we can get something good out of this. So be yourself, be honest, drink plenty of fluids, and don't just dive into a conversation and in a group dynamic when you're the new person. Or even if you're still established, if you're, many times you might have a shift pattern and you're walking into the conversation, or maybe you've just nipped out to do something else, and then the conversation started or moved on, and you're like, and then this happened, and then like that's not what we were talking about. What do you want? So yeah, Don't be afraid to assess a situation, but don't be afraid to speak up to yourself either. And don't be afraid to stand up for yourself if things are bad, but don't necessarily just punch people's noses. Yeah, okay, this has been the advice section of the blog. I hope you got something useful out of that. As always, I am on Twitter as this and on Tumblr as that. You can find me there and follow me and maybe glean other pearls of wisdom. Excuse me. Yes. Don't be yourself, be expressive, you know, judge a situation before doing all that, and don't let people push you around. Be awesome. But yeah, and also, like, best advice is to like, to share, to subscribe, and to retweet when you see my posts, because that is always good advice. Okay, thank you for watching. I've been Michelle, you've been listening, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye bye.